The first-class cabin felt calm and distant from the rest of the plane. Soft lights glowed above wide seats and quiet voices floated through the air. Ruth sat in her seat near the window with her hands resting together. She looked relaxed and patient, as if travel had taught her how to wait. Her hair showed signs of age, but her posture carried quiet strength. She wore plain clothes, nothing flashy, nothing loud. People passed her without a second look at first. She watched clouds through the small window and breathed slowly. Across the aisle, a woman named Linda shifted in her seat. She wore a sharp jacket and checked her phone again and again. Her eyes moved around the cabin, as if measuring everything. They stopped on Ruth and stayed there longer than needed. Linda frowned and leaned back with a look of doubt. She whispered to herself and shook her head. The idea that bothered her grew stronger by the second. Finally she lifted her hand and waved sharply at a flight attendant. The attendant walked over with a polite smile. Linda leaned forward and spoke in a low but firm voice. She pointed toward Ruth and complained about the seating. She said someone like that should not be in first class. She demanded that the situation be fixed immediately. The attendant listened carefully and glanced at the seat list. She replied that all seats were correct and assigned properly. Linda scoffed and crossed her arms, refusing to accept the answer. Nearby passengers noticed the tension but stayed silent. Some stared at their screens, pretending nothing was happening. Others watched with unease, unsure whether to step in. Ruth lifted her eyes and met the attendant's gaze. She gave a small, calm nod without saying much. Years of experience had taught her patience. She had faced looks like this before in many places. This one was just another moment to endure. Linda grew louder and more certain of herself. She talked about comfort, status, and expectations. She claimed she paid extra and deserved better treatment. Her voice carried through the quiet cabin. Ruth finally spoke with a steady, gentle tone. She said she belonged in that seat and would not move. There was no anger in her voice, only certainty. The words seemed to irritate Linda even more. The attendant excused herself and walked toward the front. Time stretched as the plane waited to depart. The doors remained open and engines stayed silent. Ruth returned her gaze to the window and smiled softly. Her thoughts drifted to the past and to her son. She remembered a small boy who loved toy planes. He once promised he would fly real ones someday. She had believed him even when others laughed. Footsteps echoed from the cockpit area. A man in a captain uniform stepped into the cabin. His presence drew attention without effort. The attendant followed him with a serious expression. Linda prepared herself to speak again, ready to complain. The captain looked around, then stopped when he saw Ruth. His face changed from professional focus to warmth. A proud smile spread before he spoke. He walked closer and addressed her with respect. He apologized for the delay and for any trouble. Then he called her Mom in a clear, steady voice. The word hung heavy in the air around them. Ruth looked up surprised, then smiled back at him. Passengers stared in silence as the truth settled in. Linda froze, her face losing all color. The calm cabin now held a very different kind of quiet. The silence inside the cabin felt heavier after the captain spoke. People looked at Ruth with new eyes filled with surprise and curiosity. Whispers moved softly from seat to seat without sound. Some passengers lowered their heads, feeling uneasy about what they witnessed. Others watched Linda, who remained frozen in her place. Her confidence had drained away, leaving only fear and confusion. She avoided looking at Ruth or the captain. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the armrest. The captain stood beside Ruth for a moment longer. He asked gently if she was comfortable and if she needed anything. Ruth smiled and told him she was fine. Her voice carried warmth and pride without showing it openly. She told him she was happy to see him doing well. The captain nodded and squeezed her hand briefly. The simple gesture spoke louder than words. He then turned and faced the rest of the cabin. He explained calmly that all passengers were seated correctly. His tone was firm yet respectful. He reminded everyone that respect was expected on his flight. No one spoke back or questioned him. His words settled the tension like a steady wind. The cabin slowly returned to movement and sound. The captain returned toward the cockpit without another glance. Ruth watched him go with quiet joy in her eyes. Linda remained stiff in her seat, unable to move. Her mind raced as memories replayed again and again. She had spoken loudly and made demands without thought. Now every eye seemed to judge her in return. She felt smaller than she ever had before. The comfort of first class no longer mattered. She wanted the moment to disappear. But the truth had already landed and stayed. A flight attendant returned to check on Ruth. She apologized softly for the disturbance. Ruth thanked her and said she understood. She explained that travel often brought out fear in people. The attendant nodded with relief and respect. She offered Ruth a drink and adjusted her seat gently. Nearby passengers watched the kindness unfold. The cabin atmosphere slowly softened into calm again. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Ruth closed her eyes briefly. Her thoughts drifted back to earlier years. She remembered long nights working extra hours. She remembered teaching her son to believe in himself. There were days when the world doubted them both. She never imagined moments like this would come. Yet she had always trusted his path. That trust now felt fully rewarded. The engines began to hum as the doors finally closed. The plane moved slowly along the runway. Passengers fastened seat belts and settled back. Linda stared forward, unable to meet any gaze. Her earlier words echoed loudly in her mind. She realized how quickly judgment had shaped her actions. No apology felt big enough to undo it. She stayed silent, hoping to disappear into the seat. As the plane lifted into the sky, Ruth felt a gentle pull. She looked out the window, watching the ground fade away. The sky stretched wide and peaceful above them. She felt calm knowing she belonged exactly where she sat. Not because of her son or his title, but because she had earned her place through life itself. Her quiet strength filled the space around her, and the flight moved forward, carrying every lesson with it. The flight moved smoothly above the clouds and time began to slow. Passengers settled into their own thoughts as the cabin lights dimmed. Ruth rested back and let the quiet surround her. She felt no need to explain herself to anyone. Her life had been full of moments where silence spoke louder. She watched reflections move softly along the window. Each reflection carried pieces of memory and strength. This flight felt like another chapter closing gently. Linda remained awake long after others relaxed. Her thoughts refused to rest or settle. She replayed the scene again and again in her mind. Every word she had spoken felt heavier now. She noticed the calm around Ruth and felt the contrast deeply. Shame sat with her tighter than the seat belt. She realized how easily she had judged without knowing. The awareness cut deeper than any response could. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man leaned toward his companion. He whispered about how proud the captain must feel. His companion nodded and smiled softly. They spoke of family and unseen struggles. Their words were not meant for Ruth but reached her anyway. She listened without reacting or turning. Pride warmed her, but humility kept her grounded. She had walked a long road to reach this moment. As drinks were served again, a young attendant paused near Ruth. She spoke kindly and asked about the captain. Ruth shared a small story about a boy with big dreams. She talked about late nights and early mornings, about teaching patience and courage through simple actions. The attendant listened with admiration and respect. The story spread quietly without names or titles. It became a lesson instead of a headline. Linda listened from her seat without turning. Each word felt like a mirror held up to her. She thought about her own upbringing and lessons missed. She remembered times she had been overlooked herself. Yet she had chosen to overlook someone else. The weight of that realization pressed hard. For the first time she wished she had spoken less. And listened more when the chance existed. Later the captain's voice came calmly through the speakers. He welcomed everyone and spoke about the journey ahead. His tone was steady and reassuring. Ruth smiled hearing the familiar calm in his voice. She knew that voice had once asked her for guidance. Now it guided many others safely through the sky. The circle felt complete in a quiet, powerful way. She closed her eyes and breathed with peace. The flight continued and the cabin grew calm again. Some passengers slept while others watched the sky. Linda finally turned her head slightly toward Ruth. She hesitated, unsure if courage would find her. Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed again. The fear of facing truth held her back. Yet the seed of reflection had already taken root. And it would not fade when the plane landed. The hours passed gently as the plane moved through quiet skies. Soft light shifted across the cabin and painted faces with calm. Ruth remained peaceful as if nothing around her needed fixing. She read a small book and rested between pages. Her presence felt steady like an anchor in motion. Passengers nearby felt comfort without knowing why. Some glanced at her with new respect and curiosity. The moment earlier had changed how they saw her. She did not seek their approval and did not reject it. She simply remained herself. Linda sat restless as time stretched forward. Her mind searched for a way to ease the weight inside. She remembered her sharp words and the looks she gave. Each memory pressed deeper than before. She thought about her own mother and lessons taught. About kindness and restraint that she once valued. Those lessons now felt distant but not lost. The flight forced her to sit with truth. No escape, no distraction, only reflection. The silence became a teacher she did not expect. As meal service arrived, Ruth thanked the attendant kindly. Their exchange was simple but full of warmth. The attendant smiled and asked if she needed anything. Ruth declined and wished her a good day. Nearby travelers noticed the ease in her voice. Respect flowed naturally without demand. Linda watched this quiet respect unfold. She saw how dignity worked without force. It unsettled her yet opened something new. A path she had avoided for too long. The captain stepped out briefly during the flight. He walked the aisle checking quietly on his crew. When he reached Ruth he paused and smiled softly. They shared a few private words and gentle laughter. It was a moment of family, not display. Passengers pretended not to watch but they did. Linda lowered her gaze, unable to hide her thoughts. The gap between judgment and truth grew clear. She felt the urge to bridge it before landing. Fear still held her back but less tightly now. Later turbulence shook the plane lightly. Some passengers tensed while others held breath. Ruth placed her hand on the armrest and stayed calm. Her trust in the captain never wavered. Linda felt fear rise and surprise followed. She noticed Ruth's calm and drew strength from it. The storm passed quickly, leaving relief behind. In that moment Linda realized something important. Calm was learned, not given by position. And respect was earned through understanding. As the flight began its descent, the cabin shifted again. People gathered belongings and prepared to land. Linda finally turned fully toward Ruth. Her voice shook but determination guided it. She spoke softly and admitted her mistake. No excuses, no defense, only honesty. Ruth listened without interruption or judgment. She nodded slowly and accepted the words with grace. Forgiveness did not need to be loud. Sometimes it simply needed to be real. The plane touched the ground smoothly and rolled along the runway. A soft sense of relief moved through the cabin. Passengers straightened their seats and gathered their bags. Ruth remained seated for a moment longer, taking it all in. The journey had carried more than people across the sky. It had carried truth, reflection, and quiet change. She felt grateful without needing to explain why. Some lessons did not need words to stay strong. Linda sat still after the seat belt sign turned off. She felt lighter than before, though shame still lingered. Speaking up had taken more strength than staying silent. She realized that growth often felt uncomfortable at first. Her apology had not erased the moment, but changed its ending. She watched Ruth stand with grace and patience. The calm acceptance she received meant more than anger ever could. It gave Linda something to carry forward. A reminder to pause before judging again. As passengers exited the plane, some nodded at Ruth respectfully. A few smiled as they passed her in the aisle. She returned each gesture gently without pride. The captain waited near the cockpit, greeting passengers. When Ruth reached him, he hugged her carefully. Their connection felt natural and unspoken. No announcement, no display, just family. Those nearby sensed the depth without details. The moment stayed quiet yet powerful. Outside the plane, the airport buzzed with movement. Voices, footsteps, and rolling bags filled the space. Ruth walked beside her son, sharing light conversation. She spoke of the flight and the people she met. He listened with interest and gratitude. He knew the road that brought them both here. The struggles, the patience, the unseen work. This moment was not sudden or lucky. It was built slowly over years of belief. Linda followed behind at a distance, watching them. She saw not status or title but history. A woman who had stood firm without raising her voice. A lesson unfolded not through confrontation, but through dignity and truth, standing still. Linda felt changed, not shamed. She promised herself to do better moving forward. To see before speaking and listen before judging. The airport felt different than when she arrived. Ruth paused near the exit and looked back once. She saw faces blending into the crowd. Each person carrying their own story and struggle. She hoped they would remember something from the flight. Not her seat, not her son, but the feeling. That respect did not belong to one place. It belonged wherever people chose to give it. With that thought, she stepped into the day, leaving a quiet impact behind her. The journey ended, but its meaning stayed alive. Not in headlines or raised voices, but in changed hearts and softened thoughts. Some lessons arrive wrapped in calm moments. They speak without shouting and last without force. This flight had been one of those lessons. Carried high above the clouds and brought gently down. A reminder that dignity needs no permission. And respect begins the moment judgment ends.